One of my favorite things about the Pikmin series that I don't think gets talked about nearly enough is how there's an argument to be made for any of the mainline games being someone's favorite. You don't really have that with any other game series. Paper Mario, for example, if someone says Sticker Star is their favorite game, they're wrong and it's going to start a war, because the Thousand Year Door is obviously the majority's favorite. You don't really have that issue with the Pikmin series. Even though every game is incredibly different, there's not one game that is the majority's favorite. And I think that really has to do with what the essence of Pikmin is. I broke it down much more in depth in my previous Pikmin video, so I'm not going to spend much time talking about it here. But the essence of Pikmin is managing your Pikmin to collect stuff. And it doesn't matter what you're collecting or how you manage your Pikmin. Those are the only things that are truly consistent between all four games. But the games always add additional stuff on top of those two core elements. Pikmin 1 adds time management, Pikmin 2 takes away the time management and adds dungeon crawling. Pikmin 3 removes the dungeon crawling, brings back time management, and adds multitasking. And Pikmin 4 kind of does everything. But for my personal taste in Pikmin games, 3 is my favorite. I love time management and multitasking, and I like the way the game handled collecting stuff and managing your Pikmin. But I also think Pikmin 1 is a perfect game, and I explained all of that much more in depth in the previous video. But something that I didn't really get to talk about because I didn't want to water the video down were my nitpicks, which I'm sure is a very overused pun, about Pikmin 4. I talked about the most important stuff in the video, but I want to talk about the little tiny things that don't really matter at all. Things that really don't change a thing, but they just rub me the wrong way. And the first one is the absence of Alf, Brittany, and Charlie. If you've played Pikmin 4, you'll know the game is divided in half just like Pikmin 2 was, and the first half was find Olimar, but the goal of the second half was to find a veterinarian so they could cure Ochi of his leaf tail. And the game makes it very clear that she's a Kopite and that she's with a group of 3, just like the captains from Pikmin 3. And so I was really excited going into the second half of the game. Not only were the additional levels a big surprise, but I honestly thought the names that were given were just placeholders to conceal their identities and keep them secret. I really thought we were going to see Alf, Brittany, and Charlie. But boy was I disappointed. We got stuck with these rip-offs instead. And I've accepted it at this point, but imagine how nice it would have been for there just to have been a small cameo. And it's very obvious they intended these 3 to be Alf, Brittany, and Charlie. My guess is they were removed in order to help the timeline stay more consistent, or that Brittany is a botanist and not a veterinarian. But this game still throws the timeline into pieces. If you talk with any of them, there are a few Easter eggs thrown in. They'll mention how Koppai is running out of food. You find out that York is the oldest of 13 siblings, one of them probably being Alf. And Nell has a cousin who's a really good botanist, who's probably Brittany. And Don Bergman has worked with a guy named Ducky, and hopefully you remember that Charlie owns a rubber ducky, which was used as a joke a lot throughout Pikmin 3. And while it would have been really nice to see Brittany, Alf, and Charlie, it doesn't truly change anything gameplay-wise. You would still go and rescue them and then bring them back, but it would have just made me happy. The second nitpick also has to do with some characters, but this time the main character. One of the reasons I consider Pikmin 1 to be a perfect game is because of how brilliant Olimar's character is. And even Pikmin 2 manages to introduce one of my all-time favorite characters. Pikmin 3's characters are a little bit less developed than Olimar or Louie. You don't really know too much about their past, but they still had a ton of personality and character. Pikmin 4's main character is pretty much lifeless, and that is because of the character creator, which is a really fun idea, and I'm glad they tried it. But because the main character is left bland intentionally, there's never any interesting things said about them at all. And on top of that, the character creator isn't even that good. It is extremely limiting in the fact that each body has its own designated hairstyles and faces. There's no mix or matching here. But if they had designed it like the Mii Maker, that would have been unbelievable. It probably would have become my favorite part of the game. But because it is so strict and limiting, it doesn't really add anything to the game. All it does is take away the main character having a personality. I would love to have seen them expand on it. Maybe they could have added a personality option. The third nitpick is something that I care about a lot, but it doesn't really change anything other than atmosphere. If you know me, you know that I love video game music. Some of my favorite songs of all time come from video games. The Pikmin series isn't known for its music, but it still manages to have some pretty nice and iconic soundtracks nonetheless. Pikmin 4, however, took the music in a direction that I don't really care for. They tried to make it sound a lot more serene and simple, kind of like a documentary, and while there is some charm to it, I would have really liked to have heard a proper theme throughout the game. The Garden of Hope theme is very iconic, but I don't ever remember hearing it. And I do think soundtracks are more important than some people think. Mario Galaxy probably wouldn't have been remembered as much as it is if it wasn't for that game's amazing music. Pikmin 4 also kind of disappointed me with some of their sound effects. Since there's a character creator, and since this game takes much more heavily after 2, I was really hoping that we would get to change the way our whistle sounds. Like how Louie sounds like a train, or the boss sounds like a car horn. I think it would have been really cool if the whistle sound effect changed depending on what kind of a character you created, but it's just a normal sound. Pikmin 3 also didn't have any unique whistles. I would love to know if they had intended that for Alf, Brittany, and Charlie. Pikmin 4 does have some really nice environments. This game looks really good. 3 has a little bit more personality put into its looks, but you can't say that Pikmin 4 looks bad. But something that I do miss from Pikmin 3 is how real the environment felt, and a big contributor to that was rain. It is mostly random, but there are some times the game will force it to, and I think that adds so much to the way the game feels. But that's just completely absent from 4. Every area looks and feels exactly the same every time you visit, and I can only imagine how good they would have made the rain look in Pikmin 4. But again, the rain changes practically nothing, and there's not really much more to say about it. But there are a few more things about the environment. The entirety of Pikmin 4 is spent exploring the backyard and the house of some random family, and because of that, it does have some of the most unique environments of all the games. And I do like how we're exploring much more of a world that was populated at some point. Pikmin 3 is spent mostly in nature, and other than broken pots and cell phones, you don't really see much left behind by humans. But in Pikmin 3, you're exploring an entire planet, each and every continent. And although it might not make sense how they're able to collect every piece of edible matter on the entire globe, the game feels much more adventurous than Pikmin 4. Something that's not really a nitpick because none of the games have done it yet is a really good desert level. The finale of Pikmin 3 is technically in a desert, but it's not really a traditional world, it's just the finale level. And I really thought Pikmin 4 was going to do it, but it turns out it was just the beach. But even the beach level disappointed me. I was hoping we would finally get some really good underwater sections, but we got practically nothing. So those are two things I'm still waiting for a Pikmin game to do. Hey, Pikmin has underwater levels. Another nitpick that I did talk about in the main video is that I prefer the way the onion looks in Pikmin 3 over Pikmin 4. Even though it does look more like an onion and make more sense biologically, I just like the way that it looks in 3, for no real reason. The final nitpick is probably not really a nitpick because of how big of a detail it really is, but I really do miss the boss fights of Pikmin 3. And that's not because Pikmin 4 doesn't have boss fights, it has a lot more. It brought back a lot of bosses from Pikmin 2, some of them were really unexpected. And I'm really glad that we get to see them again and they're not just abandoned. But with the lock-on feature and the addition of Ochi and the game just being easier overall, none of the bosses really gave me any challenge at all. I'm currently making an entire video dedicated to just bosses, and why so many of them just fall flat. And other than the bosses having some really unique designs and themes, there's not really anything I remember about them. The fight that I enjoyed the most was the Empress Bullblack's fight that took place in that pit. That was a very creative and innovative idea, and I would love to have seen more of that. It's one of the few fights that take full advantage of Ochi. This boss would be nearly impossible without him. I don't feel like I'm cheating the entire fight with Ochi, and I wish there were more like that. These have been my nitpicks from Pikmin 4. And even though I've been complaining about it, I don't think it's a bad game. There is a lot about it that I do like, and I really hope we don't have to wait 10 more years for Pikmin 5. Thank you for watching.